Our next presenter is Bob Fike. He will be presenting on substation inspections using the standalone client to perform mobile inspections to support substation status, pump house readings, and gas calls. Bob is a manager with Con Edison's Asset Management Engineering Group, where he manages and supports numerous proactive projects relating to asset management, affecting multiple organizations within the utility. During his 13 years with Con Ed, he's worked in the power generation and substation groups before moving into central engineering. Currently, he's involved with asset management projects for transmission operations, overhead and underground, substations, power generation, system operations, and others. Bob is also responsible for the work management system for Con Ed's Central Operations Group, Maximo, and is the co-chair of the New York Maximo Users Group. He is a graduate of the State University of New York in Manhattan College and lives in New York. When he's not working on asset management, he loves to learn and write about wine, and you can see his work at brunellobob.blogspot.com or on snooth.com.
So I'm a manager in Con Edison's Asset Management Engineering Group. We are responsible for all of central operations work management processes in Con Edison. That involves organizations like substation operations, transmission operations, where we have overhead and underground transmission systems. Our steam organization, which is Power Gen, so that's power generation, as well as the largest steam system in the world, where we supply steam to customers throughout Manhattan. Also, we have Construction Services Group, which is an organization that supports people and organizations throughout central operations. And we have a number of other smaller groups that we support in their work management and asset management needs. Currently in Maximo and DataSplice, we have about 2,000 active user records. Our service territory is all the 5 boroughs of New York and Westchester, and we're very proud of the work we do for this great city. We're currently using Maximo version 7.5. We've been using Maximo since 1998. And we're on DataSplice 5. Our first implementation of DataSplice was back in 2007. We use it in a number of ways and with a number of organizations and business needs. I'm going to focus in on one area of that in a minute. But first, let me talk about the motivating factors that we all live with, right? The challenges of good work management. And you see them here on the screen. This is a slide that I use a lot. I fine-tuned it a little bit for this presentation. We need to get the details of things that happen out in the field. In the past, you'd have a Maximo work order, perhaps with a due date, maybe a job plan, some tasks in it. When someone said, what happened back there 2 years ago, 3 years ago when they did this job, the answer would be whatever happens to be in this description, and maybe somebody's particularly diligent and they put something in the work performed field, the failure reporting, and maybe you got some information, but in general, you didn't have a lot. And that's, as most of you already know, a big reason why we use DataSplice, getting details about what happened out there in the field and getting the details that we want. Nothing, not out of the box, but real stuff that we develop and implement. So we also drive data accuracy that way with good specific questions, and you'll see some examples of that as we go along here. It's a way to bridge the disconnects between groups. You know, this is one of the biggest challenges in work management. When you have handoffs between different organizations, that's a lot of times the greatest challenge in keeping the process moving. So by using DataSplice, an interface that lots of different people are comfortable with, we can engage the whole workforce, and we can remove the stumbling blocks that tend to keep people from doing things the way we want them done and from giving us the kind of information we want from the event. All of us are looking to prevent consequences, and by driving good behavior with people in the field, by using DataSplice inspections, rounds, job plans, we use that term interchangeably, those three, we get people to do things a certain way and thereby do it correctly and keep us out of hot water. DataSplice is great for engaging field personnel as well. We found a long time ago that Maximo is a little too intimidating for most people who don't use it that often, and understandably so. And that's one of the big reasons why we started using DataSplice, because it was a more friendly user interface. And we can shape it, configure it to give our users what they need for their business process. And we'll see some of that in a few minutes. And again, I've already touched on this, providing effective user interfaces. You're not going to get what you want if people don't want to use the tool you give them. And DataSplice is a tool that people have gotten very comfortable with and gotten used to. And we don't have every work order completed via DataSplice yet, although that is one of our goals soon, a short-term goal. And at this time, we get calls from time to time from people saying, hey, I can't complete this work order in DataSplice. And I have to tell them, oh, no, that's one you still do in Maximo. So they're used to using DataSplice to manage all their work orders. And we want to keep moving forward with that. There are many stakeholders that we have to satisfy and regulatory agencies that we have to be in compliance with. And in the examples I'm going to show you today, we especially talk about environmental concerns like the EPA, the DEC in New York, FDNY, fire department, and so on. Satisfying those stakeholders and doing things correctly is key to all of us. What I'm going to zero in on today is what I'm calling ad hoc use of DataSplice, or on-demand, as-needed use of DataSplice. This is where we've taken DataSplice, and rather than tying it to a Maximo work order, which is our basic use of DataSplice, we're using the inspections on their own, a standalone round. And we do that by means of by putting them in the station forms section. While these are not married to work order in the CMMS, they are pulling from the Maximo tables, the work management system tables. So it's pulling over location IDs. We're using asset specifications and other fields, and as many fields as we want to drive the way DataSplice behaves and drive the information that people see on a round. We can shape it to be specific to the needs of the customer, and then we have replaced a number of old methods that were marginal in their effectiveness for several different ad hoc tasks. In some cases, these things were managed by means of an email, by paper, by a legacy homegrown application that was either no longer supported or really didn't cut the mustard. One example I'll show you, we used to just manage it with a Maximo work order, but that didn't really give us the details we wanted about the event. Using DataSplice helped us to consolidate legacy applications, which is something most organizations are always looking to do. So we could eliminate old ways and consolidate them into one application that people were familiar with and used to. Before I get further into what I want to show you, it's important that you understand the way we use the location field in Maximo. About 10 or 11 years ago, we decided to make all of our location IDs for asset naming intuitive. We call these smart location IDs. The one you see on the field here, it illustrates that smart, intuitive nature. In this case, looking at this location ID, if I was in the room with you, I'd look for interaction and I'd ask you, what kind of asset do you think this is? Where do you think it's located? And from looking at it with very little knowledge of Con Edison, you might recognize that it's in Manhattan, West Manhattan. It's East 75th Street. The high tension operating drawing is 260. And it's a breaker. And which breaker is it? It's breaker 1234. This may seem simple, but we have leveraged this into many, many other uses. It has been a very important foundational piece. And you're going to see how we use this in smart rounds and DataSplice to create one round that can give us asset-specific information wherever it's implemented. So instead of creating a station-specific, we have 100 different substations. Instead of creating a separate round for each one of those stations that lists the specific assets for that station, using this location ID hierarchy and a query with wildcards, we can say, and as in this example, I can say, show me everything for this station. So the work order in Maximo or the selected station on these ad hoc rounds will have this first section, the station part, and I'll say, show me everything that has BKR hyphen in it, and we'll get all the questions for breakers. Hopefully that'll make more sense as we go along, and if you have questions, happy to answer and discuss that. So here's another look at this. Right here, we're in Maximo. We're looking at the drill down, and you can see the site is Con Edison, and then we break it out by boroughs. If you saw this before it was expanded, you'd see all the boroughs in Westchester. Then we list the substations, and then under the substation I have a category of breakers and other categories for asset types. And then under that, all the individual breakers. It's intuitive. People quickly understand what we're talking about when they see this number. It supports the smart rounds functionality that helps us to have one round that fits many places and gives us asset-specific information without writing a specific special job plan for each location. It helps to make our reports and our emails targeted to customers. For example, customers in the Brooklyn area. So if I want to show just a Brooklyn Bensonhurst supervisor his or her work orders, I can just say B-BH%. Those work orders will show up for them. So I think you probably get the sense of how we can use that. And there's other applications where we use it. What are we going to talk about in Data Splice? A few different use cases. So in the agenda, we specifically talked about station status, pump house readings, and gas calls. And we'll talk about those examples. And if we have time, I'll get into a couple other examples: drum logs, temporary modifications, and different audits, on-demand audit uses. Those of us who are Data Splice users will know, or should be familiar, I think, with assigned work orders, work order search, and so on. These areas up here that are related to a maximum work order. But down here, below the substations line, we have these ad hoc, as-needed items. And before I get into it a little more, let's talk about station forms. This station forms area, as an admin, I can go down here to the station forms list, and I can put any job plan I want in here to make it available on demand and without the need of a maximum work order. So that's how we get this out there. And maybe many of you are already using it, I don't know, but I'll just speak to that person in the audience who's never seen this before. So let's look at an example. I clicked on Station Forms, and in here we've created a quick menu. I can also just click Enter Form and I'll get a list, but from the quick menu, the ones that are most often used by operators or mechanics and substations are listed here. And let's start with gas call as an example. So what's a gas call? In the electric industry, we have to quench an arc when a breaker opens. And that arc is effectively quenched by several means. One of them is SF6 gas. SF6 gas is a miracle gas. It prevents an explosion when you're pulling two contacts apart at very high voltages, 345,000 volts, and so on. But unfortunately, it is a big-time greenhouse gas, very, very severe greenhouse gas. So we have to be very careful about emissions, and we have to monitor whenever we're adding gas to these things and report on the amount of gas that we add, which in essence is a report of the amount of gas we've emitted. So we manage gas calls carefully in Data Splice. So the person can go in here and say, I want to create a gas call. I want to document that. And using that location ID drill down, they go in here and they choose their borough. And I'm going to go to the Bronx for this example. And then I have my list of stations in the Bronx. Again, the maximum location ID hierarchy is at work here. And I'm going to pick, what am I going to pick? East 179th. And then I'm going to look at my list of assets that are SF6 containing. So there's a lot more assets than this in this substation, but this list looks at a field on the specifications tab in Maximo to see, I'm sorry, it's on the front of the asset record where we have a field called insulating medium. And if that field says insulating medium equals SF6, it makes it show up in this list. So the users don't have to guess which ones are SF6. That's the only thing listed here are those types. So let's pick breaker 5E for an example. Once I've drilled down and selected that, I click OK, and it's going to open for me my on-demand Data Splice gas call form. Let's just give that a second. And I'm in the test environment, so we're running a little slow, but we should be okay here in a second. At this point, I would ask if there are any questions, but I guess we're saving that for the end. So think hard about questions and write them down.
Do we have any questions? We do not have any questions.
All right. So on the screen, you see the form that we created. And again, this is easy. We don't need IT to do this for us. We do these ourselves. And let me step back for a second. My role is the manager responsible for Maximo and Data Splice and other applications for central operations and the people who administer that. So we're the business side of all this. We do interact with IT all the time, as I'm sure you do, but we're not IT people per se, and yet we're able to create these Data Splice rounds ourselves without IT support. So we go through the questions here. We need to know what the pressure was when the person went out there and had to do a gas call, because an alarm came up. As found pressure, as left pressure, what's the temperature outside? Is an SF6 cylinder connected? So let's talk about this question for a second. Why do I want to know if a cylinder is connected? Well, the reason I want to know is because I'm pumping SF6 gas into that breaker and out of the leak in that breaker. So if you leave a cylinder connected to this breaker, it's a significant issue that we want to know about, and we want people to be made aware of it. And promoting awareness of events in the field is one of our key uses of Data Splice. So if somebody says, yes, there is a cylinder connected, just pumping SF6 into this device, a Data Splice alarm comes up, and remarks are required. I'll say, cylinder, I can put whatever I want in here for a comment, but it is a required comment. I'll just put some comment in there. And now, if no CM work order exists, I want someone to create one, because we want to document this leak and we want to repair it. But I don't want them to duplicate if there is already a work order out there. So they can click the drop down here and look for an existing work order. As it turns out, it already exists. So good news, I don't have to make a work order. And good news, I didn't just create a duplicate, because Data Splice told me it's already been reported. So if it was not already there, if there were no work orders in that drop down, then I check that box, and a separate pop-up window would come up with the fields that we've designated as required for a work order. And that's, I'd love to get into that, but I don't think it's part of the scope of this conversation, but it's part of that interface conversation being a much easier way for us to get users to report deficiencies they see out in the field. So, but here I just say I select the existing work order. And then I continue. So it's documenting that. Okay, how much gas was added? So here's the point. Notice how specific this question is. We had to explain carefully what we wanted in this question, because initially when we implemented this, we had people subtracting 135 PSIG, or I'm sorry, 120 from 135 and telling us 15. But that's not what we want. We don't want the difference in pressure. We want the weight of the gas. So that's why we put a very detailed question here, or instruction. Enter the actual weight of gas added to the equipment. This is done by subtracting the weight of the bottle before the gas call and after the gas call. Do not use as found and as left pressure values. So this helped us to drive data accuracy and really understand how much gas was being used. And we have other means of tracking this as well, but this is a good redundancy in what we do. So let's say it was 10 pounds. So I put in 10 pounds. Now we want to see what serial number, what cylinder was used for this, so we can deduct that 10 pounds from that cylinder. So I put in a serial number for the cylinder. What date was it? I select the date from the calendar. And then finally, the last question, would you like to enter more details about the gas call? So this is the kind of question we put in just about every Data Splice round at the end, a catch-all. If it's a PM record, we put something like, were there any instances or incidences or deficiencies not covered in this job plan that you'd like to tell us about, or that you'd like to report? And if you say yes, you get that data splice alarm pop-up window, and you can put in your comment, and you can create a corrective maintenance work order if you want, and then you just say okay. So now I've answered all the questions in the round. It tells me the readings are complete. By the way, if I had missed a point, I would not get this message. And then I just say yes, and it saves it, commits it to history. So that is gas call. And that's just the first example we were going to talk about. So another on-demand use we have is the station status. So operators have to have an obligation, a requirement by procedure to report station status once per shift. So when the operator comes in, he or she will provide information about a number of specific things. Now, this used to be managed in a Outlook form. So in Microsoft Outlook, they'd have to go drill down and find the form and fill it out, and then it'd be very hard to locate, and just it was marginal. It was all there, but they'd have to fill it out every time, and it would have to be specific to the station, unique. So a different form would have to be made for every single station. But in this case, in Data Splice, we're leveraging that smart location ID. So if we want to know about battery banks and load boards, we just put in one single round that wildcard statement showing in the hierarchy the wildcard and then BAT wildcard, and that will bring up all the battery points. You'll see that here in a second. So we'll come back to that topic, this using the smart location in this round, but we'll work our way down to it. Other things that we do here is we bring in the previous readings. So this can be a long form in some stations. So if you go into a very big station, this could be a lot of questions, and you don't want to have to fill this out every time you come in if nothing has changed. So let's say, okay, yeah, I'm not the 1500 to 2300 person. I'm the 0700 to 1500 person. So I change that, and when I move on, you get a little check mark over there. It says I'm done with that point. And when I look here, I say, okay, yeah, yesterday we had this alarm and this alarm up. Nothing has changed. I'm just going to check the box. Now I haven't had to bother with writing it all in because it's the same status as it was yesterday. And I continue through. No fire protection out of service. No other, this equipment was out of service yesterday, but now it's not. So I'm going to take that out of there, and I'm going to say none. And I move on. And let's just continue through. I can say the same, hasn't changed, and a couple other points. By the way, you'll see how we use these pick lists. It's so easy to make a unique pick list in Data Splice 5 especially, even more so than 4 was. I can quickly say, yes, no, maybe if I want, or yes, no, purple, whatever I want. It's very easy to set that up. Okay, so I said defective equipment. I get an alarm there, and I would fill that out, but I'm not going to in this case. Let me change that. Okay, so here we go with a point that's looking at that smart round. So this particular station has 2 DC load boards, load board 1, 125-1, 125-2. Some stations will have 4 load boards or even more. Again, I only have one job plan inspection, aka round, that I have to maintain in the background as an admin. So let's say we make a business decision. We want to add a new question to the station status requirement for operators. If I made a specific job plan for every single station that we have, I'd have to go modify 100 job plans. But in this case, I only have to modify 1. So if I say, okay, we're going to add a new question, I make that change, and everything else is the same because it's specific to the station based on that smart location ID and the smart round, as we call it. Not only that, when I query the tables later, I can say, show me history on load board 1 at Trade Center. And I can get that specific history from station status because I have written it against the actual asset, which is pretty powerful. You know, asset-specific information is always important and sometimes a challenge to get in asset management. So I'll continue. So does this load board have a ground on it? I say no. Does this one have a ground? No. And I continue. Now we have questions for the battery bank. Same deal. Smart Round looks at everything that has BAT dash in it. And again, there's only 2 banks in this station. Vehicles in the station. Yesterday that vehicle was in the station. It's still there, so I'm just going to check the checkbox. Any test trucks in the station? No. And indication lights. So here's an example of a customized pick list that we created, because sometimes partially inspected is an acceptable choice, or a choice that we may get. So I'll put that in there, put my comment, and I continue. So spill carts. Once again, the smart location, I do have spill carts in the station for dealing with spills of oil or other things. So is the seal broken or the wheels in the poor condition on the spill cart? I say no. I leave it at no. I'm good. By the way, notice the orange over here. That tells me I've got an alarm on this point. Okay, I want to know how many portable ground sets I have. Let me just kind of buzz through this a little bit. Here's a great one we added. Are there any issues with the perimeter fence, gates, building, or equipment, door locks, or cameras? Right. We can pop this in here, and we did. It's an example of a question we added without having to modify many rounds. So I continue. What else? Safety equipment, active leaks. Okay, so here's another customized list. So some pieces of equipment will have small leaks that we manage with absorbent material and so on, so that it doesn't go into the environment. And then we look for an opportunity to repair it, but sometimes it's very difficult to get this equipment out of service because we want to maintain reliability of our electrical supply to customers. So they'll be there for a long time. So it's common for the answer to this question to be yes. But what we're saying is, yes, there are leaks in the station, but they are contained, so no oil is entering the environment. If I say no, then I'll get a data splice alarm, or not checked, I'll get a data splice alarm. And that's a coaching opportunity for that supervisor. So, okay. And I apologize if you're getting some background noise here, but we'll try to minimize that. So next, environmental waste. Are all drums properly labeled and secure? So we're driving environmental compliance here. Was any SF6 gas added? You guys know about that now. Nitrogen used. Have any nitrogen cylinders been changed during your shifts? That's something else we need to know about. And then finally, are all cylinders capped and secure? And once I answer my last question, once again, I'm asked to save, and I go ahead and save my point there. So that was station status, a second example of on-demand data splice rounds that we use. And then, and notice I just got an email telling me about that. So we use the email function to deliver this to whoever we want. We use distribution lists, so on. So here's all the answers I put in. Sent me an email. Maybe I'm the station supervisor or the area manager. We leverage that quite a bit to keep people in the loop when there's an issue or when something has been done. And then the next example is pump house readings. And by the way, as we go through this, I hope that you're envisioning how this might work for the unique needs of your business, because the great thing here is the configurability of it. Data Splice is great for that, in that you can make it fit your needs by using things like applicabilities and value lists and smart rounds and so on. So I hope you see some fit for you in the way we're doing this. And honestly, I don't know. Maybe there's other people already doing it this way. I'd love to hear if others are. So, okay, so we're waiting for pump house readings to open up. So what's a pump house reading? let me tell you a little bit about underground transmission feeders. Underground transmission feeders with voltages like 138 kV or 345 kV require cooling and obviously required insulating medium to prevent arcing. So we have a lot of underground transmission, and that system is full of oil. And we need to know the condition of that system, whether or not oil is going into the environment or not. Very important to us, obviously. So to monitor it, we monitor the levels of tanks that are located on one end or another of these feeders. And so we do daily or more than one time a day readings of the tanks. So I picked a station that only has one pump house in it because it's simple. But if I picked, say, well, one of our other stations or bigger stations, I'd get a list of a whole bunch of tanks in the station. Because once again, I'm using that smart round technology or smart round approach that pulls up every pump house tank in the station. So again, one job plan fits all and gives us asset-specific information. And in this case, I'm telling people in the system operations group, again, bridging gaps between organizations, telling them the status of the dielectric system. So here we have a tank that the previous reading was 4,500 gallons. And if I go in here and I say it's now 3,000 gallons, and I move to the next point, I get a data splice alarm because a change of greater than 10% or 200 gallons is something to be concerned about. So they're given specific instructions: notify the shift supervisor and the oil desk, enter a maximal work order, take action. And these alarm messages are easy to configure to your exact needs to direct people in the field to handle these things exactly the way you want them handled. So I'll say shift notified. Is there a work order in on this already? No, but so I could check the box and create a work order. And let me do that real quick because I think we have time. Just so you see what that looks like. So there's our work order entry form. This is a bad example because I'm not on a round that has, okay, I take that back. There it is. So what it does is automatically populate the long description with information from the thing I was already doing in Data Splice. It gives me the correct location ID automatically, an asset number, and so on, which is great. So this increases our data accuracy, data quality, and it's a good thing. So that's just a little bit of a sidetrack. But as you see, it calculated the difference here in 1,500 gallons different from the previous reading, and it's complete. If I said no, I could go back. Maybe it was a typo. My big fingers hit the wrong key. I can go back and fix it. But I'm going to say, yep, that's the situation. I click yes, and it saves it. So that's pump house readings. Once again, using smart rounds, using that previous reading ability, and calculated difference ability also, which we can leverage in Data Splice. So I hope you're with me, and this is of interest. I'm going to show you one more example. Are we good on time?
You're just fine, Bob. Yeah, we're good.
Okay, good. So let me show you another example that we didn't mention. So actually, I'll show you this. So first I could pick the round of my choice from this list. So, excuse me, we created a round called Supervisor Station Inspection. Supervisor is required to do that periodically, but not tied to a maximal work order. I can pick that one. I can pick any of the ones I showed you before. We created one for the environmental health and safety people to go and do a unannounced assessment of a station. So that's how you can use the station forms to do this. But let's just go back to the home screen here. And I want to show you something called drum logs. So what's a drum log? In our business and in most people's business, from time to time you generate waste material that is sensitive in nature, environmentally sensitive. Sometimes it's hazardous, sometimes it's non-hazardous. And we have regulatory requirements to track it. in a certain way. So in data splice, we used to do this with a maximum work order, with a work type of DL for drum log, and we would get marginal information. It really didn't work as well as we'd like it to. So instead, we created an on-demand job plan, and it is for drum logs. And when I click New Drum Log, it brings up a form that I can fill out. And maybe I want to know the drum number early, so I can just click Generate Number, because I'm going to be labeling that drum in the field with a unique number, so Data Splice provides that number for me, or it'll just give it to me when I'm done. So let's start by selecting a station. Let's say I'm in Queens this time, and let's say I'm in Astoria, and what's my physical location? So it's in the drum, in the waste storage area. Now, I have to choose a waste category and a waste type. So I know what the waste type is. It's used fluorescent light bulbs, all right? This is something we can't just throw in the garbage can. We put it in a waste drum, we put a label on it, we track it. And different people from different areas have an interest in it. So we have to be able to track it in such a way that everybody who needs to know can know what the story is on that. So I start by selecting a waste category. And let's say I say hazardous. Now, through an applicability arrangement, our waste types in this drop-down list will only be those that are hazardous. So I'm looking for broken bulbs. I guess that's the one I'm looking for. Maybe I picked a bad example. I was hoping it wouldn't be there, and then I could show you, oh, I must have picked the wrong category, and I would go back and pick non-hazardous, and then I would see something else. But I think you get the point. Let's say it's lamp ballast. So I say it's lamp ballast, and now I have a choice of container sizes, which is completely customizable, and that's a bad word, configurable, right? From our previous presenter who astutely noted customizations are bad, but configuration is good, and there's a lot of that here. So let's say it's a 55-gallon drum, and what kind of container is it? It's fiberboard, and what else? It's got my employee number on it, date and time. I can have some other optional information here, not required fields, and I can fill that in or not. And when I'm done, I click Done, and it's going to save that record. And now the environmental health and safety person who wants to know about these things can go and query, and they can say, show me all of the open drum logs for this station. I'm about to do a visit there, do an evaluation, an EH&S evaluation on the station, so I just do a search, and it shows me two. So, yeah, funny, I must have used that same example another time. Or no, somebody else did, that's real. So, I get that list, and now I can manage these. Let's say I'm the mechanic or the operator in the station or the supervisor. I can change the status of this one and say, okay, this is full. It's ready to be picked up. So I change it to full, ready, and I say, okay, and it changes the status. So me, as the EH&S specialist who may or may not get a phone call from the supervisor or an email, I can just go into the system and look and see where they are full. As a matter of fact, I could go in here and do a query of only those that are full and ready for pickup. And I say, okay, now I know I've got to send somebody up to Ramapo, I've got to send somebody to Webster Avenue, and also to Astoria Annex to take care of these drum logs. So let's say I go to Ramapo. Actually, I don't want to do that. Let's just say I go to the Astoria Annex, and I go and I pick up this drum, or have someone pick it up. Now I can change the status to picked up, put in my comment, and I say okay, and now it's in history. And now whenever an auditor wants to know how we manage this material, and sometimes it can be significant in a major job or major cleanup, we have a very good trail by which to track it. And as a matter of fact, we're developing something even more, I'm going to use an overused term, robust in tracking oil leaks and the management of long-term oil leaks and the materials around it. So maybe next year we can talk about that. So that's a drum log. And let's see, was there another example I wanted to show you? Oh, I'll just tell you about temporary modifications. Yes. I heard it.
From the floor, do you want to go through your last example?
I would like that. I would like that. I can't hear you very well, though. I'm turning up my volume, and I'm listening.
So the question was, what mobile devices does Con Ed use? Are the field workers connected wirelessly all the time, or do they dock?
Okay. So, like as I mentioned, we have a number of different business models that we support with Maximo and Data Splice and the asset management group. So I'll tell you about the transmission line maintenance people, which you heard some of that about from the NIPA group, showing you the same kind of work. They're using Surface, I think, the Surface Pro, and they are undocked. They're syncing up at the beginning of their inspection day and getting all the data they need for that day for the area they're going to be working in. By the way, they're using the GIS there as well. And they go out to the field and work connected or disconnected via cellular network or even a Wi-Fi hotspot. Or if they're disconnected, it's no big deal. They can do everything they want, complete data splice rounds and so on that device. We're transitioning them and others to iPhones. Not iPads, just because of our IT restrictions. I'm sure no one in the audience can relate to that, he said sarcastically. But we are not, until recently we weren't even able to use iPhones, but now we've been given the permission to use them. So we're trying to move people over to a smaller device using Data Splice on iPhones in that group and others. So there's a couple answers to the question, what kind of devices do we use? Just so you know, for many of our users, they don't use a mobile device at all. They go out to the field, they do the work, they print out the blank report, and then they come back into the control room and enter the information. That's we're moving them to mobile devices. One of those devices is the Motion tablet, but again, we're looking to end up on iPhones, maybe large format iPhones for most of our users. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
The other one, how many Data Splice users? I believe that was 2,000? 2,000
potential. There's 2,000 user records, active user records in Maximo, which makes them active potential users for Data Splice. Simultaneous users, I think we're much, much, much lower than that. But just saying, that's how many users we support as asset management. So it depends on the organization you're talking about. The one other thing I was going to tell you about is something called temporary modifications. That's where we, again, ad hoc, no work order associated with it, where we document changes made in the design of a station. Perhaps you needed to jump out an alarm for a temporary condition. We want to track that because we don't want to let that go unknown over time. We have a procedural requirement to check these things that have been put in as temporary modifications, and if they're there too long, we may make a determination to make them permanent. But first, you have to document them someplace where people can see them, and that's where they do that without opening it and getting into the details. It replaced what used to be a paper logbook in control rooms and substations. Now it is in an electronic database where everybody can see it and manage it. So I'm going to go back to my slides here, just change screens real quick. And I've got just one little recap slide. So what did we talk about? We talked about ad hoc use of Data Splice, using it as needed as opposed to time-based Maximo associated stuff. And we talked about smart rounds a lot. It's a favorite topic because of how much bang for the buck we get in that. It helps us eliminate site-specific individual rounds. One round fits all, but brings up asset-specific information even though it fits all, and captures readings against those specific assets. What else? We talked about the previous readings being reused or being brought in for use in a calculation to make the user aware of what the condition was last time the round was completed. What else? So we're using the station forms list. You can throw any job plan you want in there to make it available on demand. And talked about how these ad hoc uses have helped us consolidate legacy tools, other applications and methods that were marginal in their effectiveness. So that is all I have for now. There's plenty of other great things to talk about in the way we use data splice, but it was nice to focus in on this one area.
We appreciate your time and presenting this information for us. So
It was my pleasure.